and welcome to Bless Their Yap. I'm your Reverend host, Olivia. Join me and my patron saint, Marianne, as we dive each week into the Gen Z Holy Text, a notes app. Every week, we are each tasked to write down our topic in a notes app, and then we yap about it. Marianne, what's on the dock for this week?
For me, I have an interesting topic that I want to hear your opinion, and I
Okay.
would love to hear other people's opinion about it. So, oh no, I need to sneeze.
That's true.
I'm gonna work through it. Work through it. Okay.
Onion or
Um,
whatever.
I'm curious. Right now, I have like money anxiety where like I don't really spend a lot of money on things, or it takes a lot for me to spend money on things. And I know you, although you did successfully complete no shop January or whatever it was
I
called.
know. I should be also doing No Shop February, but it's my birthday month.
Ah, dang. So you can't. You could
So,
do no
literally.
shop March. But anyways, I'm curious whether you enjoy or you would rather like put money towards experiences now and forego that saving for later, or if you would rather save right now to ensure your future and all of that, and then do experiences later on in life after you have that like nest egg or whatever.
Ooh, that's a really good question because I feel like I fall in a really weird place in that. Like, I really am always like, I want to go on a trip and I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do that.
Hmm.
I'm also extremely anxious about losing money that I do have. Um, in a very weird and kind of like way. For example, my husband and I have been investing money into bonds, quite frankly.
Yay!
And I
Yay,
know it's really
investing.
cool. However, and this is really bad. This is like a thing that I'm a little bit embarrassed about, but I'm not probably going to change, and I should. I kind of put that burden onto him because
Mm,
there's sort of like a level of like, okay, then you can bear the responsibility of it and I don't have to.
mhm,
And because I'm extremely anxious about putting my money into, like, the stock market or bonds in general. I'm a very, like,
mhm.
low risk person. I do not like the
Yeah,
idea of putting a lot of money into that kinda stuff. Part of it is, quite frankly, I'm just not educated enough and haven't bothered to educate myself, which
yeah.
is a problem. Um, but
I think a lot of people are in that boat
yeah.
of not a lot of people are educated about that, so they either don't do it or they, like, lean on their partner to do it. So I think there is space for you to learn, but it's not necessarily a problem.
Yes, and I think that's, like, where my friendship with you has been very because you are someone that's very knowledgeable. And you also don't bore me. So, I feel like talking to you, I'm like, "Okay, okay." Like, I can kinda, like, track what you're saying, and I think you're much like, obviously a lot less intimidating to, like, go to for those sort of questions.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think I'm a very, like, because I really want like, my big goal in my trad lifestyle, obviously, is to have
Trad
a
life.
trad life. Is we are not promoting tradwifery on here really quickly. We always joke about it, it's my meme.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I really so my big goal, like, in my life is to own a house someday, which is very hard in this economy for a lot of people,
Mhm.
and but that's, like, something I really wanna do. Sorry, Micah was doing something weird off camera. And that's my big goal, and so, like, the idea of not having money to achieve that goal makes me very anxious, hence where my
Yeah.
risk adverse comes from. However, I have crow brain, and I am very impulsive, hence why I feel like I
Mm.
have, like, I have this big shopping problem, whereas I like a quick dopamine hit of thinking that I'm getting something, especially and we've talked about this a little bit, both on and off
Mhm.
pod, of getting something while feeling like I'm saving money. So, like, lowballing a $40 item on Depop that I'll still get,
Right.
even if it's still maybe $40 or over when shipping comes around, but I won the deal, so it feels like I'm saving money. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. I don't know why my exposure
Well,
went
that's
crazy,
okay.
but,
You're just an angel
um,
and you're glowing.
I am glowing. Um, I understand where you're coming from. I
Mhm.
think for me, I'm the opposite of I'm the one who handles our finances in my household. So my husband kind of like sits back and relaxes with that. And then I'll like pay all the bills and ensure that our investments are like being placed into things that make sense for us. I'm also much more risky when it comes to my investments. Like, risky is a very generous term. I invest in like the S&P 500, like in ETFs that aren't necessarily as risky as investing in like one specific company. Like
Yeah.
I'm not investing in any penny stocks or anything, but I'm also not necessarily putting all my eggs in like the bonds market because I realize like even though the stock market right now is, well, technically it's doing great, but like it can be very fluctuant. I think, like, that's better for my long term or our long term, financial health, and then eventually transitioning out into bonds and things like that when we're ready to, like, retire and, like, need that, like, liquidity. So, my husband and I were talking about how we're interested in learning more about how people spend their money, not, like, ridiculous, not like billionaires or
Yeah.
anything, but, like, wealthier people spend their money, because I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about how even the upper class people or, like, not really class, just they have a lot of, money, how they feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck, even though they're making like 200 plus $1,000 a year. So, like in theory, this like, I guess income creep, where you have people spending more money because they're making more money, and spending on things that don't necessarily need to be spent on. So, for example, putting their kids in private school, instead of like public school. Realistically, at least here in Canada, there's no really discernible difference in private versus public because our public school system is so good here. The only difference realistically is you get potentially, if you go to a religious private school, you get more of that. Or if you just go to a regular private school, you're likely grouped into classes with other rich
Yeah,
kids. So
clout.
you get those. Yeah, exactly. You
Clout
get
and
that
network.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I would classify that as kind of an experience because you can choose, between, like, which more cheap option, I guess, with free public school versus, like, private school, but it also extends to my reality right now. So, for example, my friends are obsessed with going to concerts. Like, they love to go to a concert, and for me, I'm like, I love to go to a concert, but I
They're
also don't
expensive.
wanna dish out. Yeah, they're expensive. I don't wanna
$400.
dish out $200, $400 for, like, an artist that, yeah, I like, but, like, my concert person that I would love to see every single time they go on is Taylor Swift, and I know we've talked about this on the pod before because 'cause I'm a huge Swiftie, but, like, essentially, I'm almost building up a savings account in my head for every time my friends wanna go to a concert and I'm like, "Oh, I wanna go,"
But I
but
wanna
then
see
I
Taylor
don't go,
Swift.
I'm like, "That's going to Taylor Swift when she comes on, when she does another tour."
I love
Um,
that.
but that's the thing is, like, I'll save up these experiences that I'm not spending money on to use later on. So I'm almost, and not necessarily giving up, like, life, if that makes sense, but I'm not doing all those things.
I wouldn't say you're giving up life, but you are I think the closest analogy, and I don't think this is a really good analogy either though, is like you are saving the candle for a special occasion in the sense of, like, when somebody buys a
Mm,
really nice
yeah.
candle that they really
No, that's a
like,
good
they
analogy.
don't burn it because they wanna save it for something, and I actually think, like, saving for Taylor Swift is really good. I think my challenge, and this is maybe a really bad challenge 'cause, like, I think you are much more financially smart than I am, is, well, what if Taylor Swift like, make sure that you
Never
then
goes
spend
back.
those funds on Taylor Swift when they come, or else,
Right,
like, what was the point of you hoarding this, right?
right.
And
Yeah.
I think if we're going back to, um, wealthy people kind of, like, hoarding this or, like, choosing these experiences that are, like, quote, unquote, like, more privileged than, like, like, sending your kid to a private school versus public school. In America,
Mhm.
private school versus public school is not only sort of a clout decision of, like, you are more likely to get your kid in network with other kids, like, of your ilk or of ilk that you wish to be, sort of like putting your daughter in, like in Alabama, for example, with Bama Rush, in, like, a
Mm,
sorority, so that way she can end up having a really wealthy fraternity boyfriend/husband. I was in a private school, and my private school was actually more of a charter school, and there is, like, some difference. I don't and part of it is because that the, public school system in America is really bad.
yeah.
And so not only is it a clout decision, there's also a decision of, like, I have dyslexia, for example, and so, like, my birth mom was like, "Okay," like, I put her in a public school where she might not, like, get the same
Get the attention.
needs, yeah, that
Mm.
she needs, and also I was, like, at that time dealing with the death of my dad and missing school kind of regularly as I was, like, mentally spiraling out of control. And so part of that decision to put me, like, in, like, private school, what charter and private school was, like, in theory supposed to better, like, my education. Now, I do think that is really selfish because I think all children deserve good education regardless
Mhm.
of whether or not they pay tuition to get in.
Yeah.
Um and in theory, there was I remember at my school, my middle school, there was, like you had to apply to get in. I'm 11. I had to apply to get into a school. I had to show
Yeah.
that I, like, won an award for poetry in, like, 5th grade or something, because that was, like, the greatest accomplishment I had done at that point. Because 'cause I'm 11.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, "Well, I didn't do very good, like, I'm not
Mm.
impressive." And when I think about that, I think that's really weird because obviously, like, that's just a front, right? If my parents are willing to shell out the money, they're willing to shell out the money.
Right.
And so I do think it is weird. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like those I guess the decision is very personal and it depends on what your income is. But even if you are like I guess this is a specifically a problem or very loosely problem that you get the mm, the more that you have disposable income, because essentially you have the privilege of deciding, "Should I save this money or should I spend it?"
Yeah,
Essentially, right? So, like, we're gonna caveat this conversation with that in mind, but it is interesting that people now, like, even who are making more, find that they're living paycheck to paycheck because they might be living beyond their means or
exactly.
on paper living within their means, but in a way that isn't allowing them to save up for their future. So they're kind of spending all of their money on, you know, like potentially like their mortgage payment and property taxes and things like that. And maybe they're spending more on like eating out and things like that, those kinds of experiences, rather than saving for their retirement.
I think part of that, um also comes from a couple things. I think depending on the age of this person, right, and I'm just going to assume we're probably talking about, like, primarily younger people, excluding
Mhm.
the conversation around, like, private school versus public school. I think part of it is social media, obviously. And I think idolizing fame and money and, like, hustle culture and, like, clout is, like, such a core part of capitalism and, like, in a way, human experience that I don't think is ever going to go away. But I personally and maybe it was just because my brain was, like, cooking at that time because I was a teenager, feel like it really ramped up around, like, the mid-2010s where I feel like hustle culture and, like, flexing and, like, Jeffree
Mm.
Star with, like, the Gucci grills and stuff like that really and, like, private jets, really became a big thing, and I feel like a big part of it was social media and the sort of the rise of, like, the influencer and King Kylie.
Yeah.
Um and that is also where I feel like the living beyond your means really kind of ramped up was to keep up with the image of being exuberantly wealthy.
Yeah.
Um, and alternatively, I think for a more normal person that is kind of more around like our, you and me and like our friends,
Mhm.
I think there is a growing sense of unrest upon young people where we don't feel like the economy is ever going to get better. We don't feel like we are ever going to be able to afford a house. So yeah,
Mhm.
why wouldn't I spend $200 on a concert? I don't think this is
Yeah.
necessarily a good
It's
opinion.
like revenge almost. It's
Yeah,
like we're like, "Okay, well, this is never gonna be within our ability or our means." So, like, the money that I would have spent on, like, a mortgage payment or property taxes, I might as well just put it into somebody else. And then it almost is like this cycle of, well, if we keep spending this money on these other things, we really won't have an opportunity.
yeah.
And, like, for example, here in the area that I live, in Canada, I mean, I think all across Canada, housing prices are on the decline. I think that they're down
Yay!
6%. They're down like 6% from
Good news
last
for a girl
year, which
moving.
was, yeah, 2025. Um I don't think that this is a whole other topic that I would love to, like, get into if people are interested in, like, my thoughts, like, some
That's what this podcast is
random
for.
girl's thoughts. Yes, exactly, on, like, the Canadian housing market, but, essentially, I think in areas that are already established, like in, the like, major cities like Toronto, Vaughan, Mississauga, et cetera, like the GTA area, I feel like it's more out of reach for people our age to own homes, which is why we're seeing a little bit more people kind of leave those outskirt like those areas and go more north or like just outwards to hopefully find housing that even though it's in basically middle of nowhere or like not really connected to like a city, the houses are more affordable. The problem with that though is that all the jobs are like so just central to like the GTA
Yeah.
area. Like if you want to work for, those big companies like Meta, Google, et cetera, those like any tech jobs really are in Toronto. Any finance jobs like aside from, those wealth management companies like in specific areas, um they're kind of all in Toronto. But like those bigger jobs are kind of all in the GTA and mostly Toronto. So
Yeah.
the incentive for people to go outwards is yes, housing is cheaper, but then how will you be able to afford the housing if you can't find a job to support that like level of income that you need for that? Um but again, that's kind of like a different topic.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. My and this is just because I'm a dumb American, and I don't understand
You're not
Canada.
dumb.
Eh.
You're not.
Oh,
You are a very, very intelligent person.
still have
Yeah. You are
I'm
so pretty and so
ah,
smart,
okay,
Olivia.
that's fine.
You're so
I've been
smart.
saying that this is a quick side tangent. I visited Canada to visit Marianne, like, last
Yeah.
week. All her friends and her keep saying, "So sexy, so smart," and I think it's the
Pretty, so
funniest.
pretty.
Oh, is it so
But
pretty, so
yeah,
smart?
sexy
I
too.
say, "So
Yeah.
sexy, so smart," because, again, I just took it and ran. It's so funny. I keep saying it. It's hilarious.
It'll happen, like, when so a very specific circumstance that happens a lot is, I will, like, park in
Mhm.
parking spot that was slightly difficult to get into,
So
and
sexy, so
everybody will
smart.
clap and be like, "You're so pretty and so smart," and it's really funny.
Yes. I especially love saying it to someone at a party that we had recently
Yeah.
who was male and that I didn't know.
And they were just like, "Right,
Yeah,
okay."
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Also shout out man on the pod. Another joke I love saying and that I keep saying as I get road rage in America is "fuck you."
Yeah.
You.
That's a shout out to Carla's mom.
Shout out
I love the
Carla's
way
mom on the
because she'll
pod.
say so I guess another side tangent is she's like Latina, she's from Venezuela, um, and she like doesn't really think that English swear words are like as bad as like if she were to say it in Spanish. So it's really funny because she'll just say like "fuck you" and like realistically that's a bad word, like that's really
That's
bad,
pretty
but she doesn't think that way.
so
I'm gonna
cute.
need to censor this for YouTube for sure.
It's so funny. The way May says it especially, I don't know what about it. It, like, scratches my brain in a way that it, like, has infested, and that
That's so
becomes,
funny.
like, my initial, like, road rage term right now.
It's really good. It's really good.
Anyway,
Yeah, my friends have really good sound bites.
our friend's so sexy, so smart.
Exactly. Alright, what were we talking about before?
Finances and the state
Yeah.
of economic unrest amongst the young and
Mhm.
how I also think this is also circling back to social media because social media
Mhm.
to me is my thesis of life.
Yeah.
Is I think that there's been also a really big trend upon this sort of like, I don't want to call it a revolution, that feels wrong, but like an understanding that the young, particularly millennial Gen Z, feel like they will never be able to own a home. Thus, they pour money into not just like tangible stuff like clothes or like door dashing, but specifically into experiences like travel
Mhm.
and like concerts and stuff like that or festivals.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot too. I do think that that's inherently like a bad decision, but I do also understand it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I totally get it. I think it makes sense because again, it's like that like almost revenge type of mentality. But when you see all of these people on social media doing these things, it's like, how am I supposed to feel about like
Yeah,
you don't you're almost questioning like, okay, is this how life is supposed to be done? Like, am I
yeah.
supposed to go to all of these concerts or supposed to go to music festivals or have all these experiences, go traveling and things like that? Or am I supposed to do all of these other like
Adult
things that
thing.
yeah, and might not necessarily lead anywhere. So I'm always questioning like, okay, if I'm saving this money to use later, am I giving up more now, like, in terms of happiness than I would for getting that thing later? And, like, as an economist, I'm always, like, thinking of optimizing my happiness
Optimizing
or,
growth
utility
and
is what
cost.
we call it. It's also everybody has their own,
Yeah.
like, way of, like well, I think of it as a formula of, what will make them the most happy, um, while keeping in mind, like, what their future is going to look like. So, yeah, it's I feel like for me, I try to keep a balance of spending money now or trying to, like, be included in, like, the activities that my friends do that are, like, monetary, while also making sure that, like, I'm not making myself anxious
Yeah.
when I'm spending that money.
And I think, like, don't put yourself in, like, financially dangerous situations, right? And I think really just achieving the balance, which I'm really working on, is, like, part of that, right? Like, it's just like, "Okay, I'm gonna have fun." Like, honestly, this is my, like, embarrassing come to Jesus moment. I'm bearing my cross out to you, Marianne. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not as cool as Marianne and her friends because I don't go to as many
Lies.
concerts." No, because I don't go to any concerts.
No, but
And I
that's
was
how I
like,
feel sometimes.
"Ah."
That's honestly how I feel because I feel like
You go to
they're
so
going to all
many.
of these things together, they're going like, they're hanging out, they're going to concerts and, like, different activities, and then I'm like, "I'm not as
No.
cool." Like, I wanna go to concerts, but I also they invite me to go to concerts,
And you
and
go
I'm
to
like, "No."
so, like, I think save up and go to one nice concert that you wanna go to when you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah,
And it's
that's the
okay if you
thing,
don't.
I'm saving up for Taylor Swift,
Taylor
but
Swift
nobody's gonna go with me because
and
those
Joey.
those
Well,
would be
Rogan?
insane.
That feels like a Rogan
That's
activity.
true, that is a Rogan thing. Rogan will come with me.
I wanna
Shout
go to
out
the
Rogan.
Ethel Cain concert, and nobody wants to go with me.
So Carla had, a friend of mine had tickets. I think she had 1 or 2 tickets, and I was like, "Girl, I wish Olivia was here because
What the
she was
fuck?
sick, so she couldn't go."
Oh my god.
And so, like, I couldn't I could have gone, but I didn't wanna go alone, so that was a moment where I was like, "If
Normalize
Olivia
going to
was
you know
here."
what? Normalize going to concerts alone. I'm gonna start that's my goal. I
What?
say, I'm gonna go to a
To
concert.
normalize going to concerts alone?
Yeah. Normalize spending
Mm.
money on concerts occasionally when financially responsible.
When financially viable?
And sometimes you just gotta go by yourself. Sometimes you just gotta vibe by yourself.
I have such a fear of being perceived to be on my own because I don't wanna be, like,
No, I do
that
too.
loser in the
No.
cafeteria that's, like, sitting down by herself.
Real.
Um, so
No,
that's
you and I are on the
yeah.
same page, and we're empowering this for ourselves.
Right, okay.
Because we are those
We're gonna go
losers.
to concerts on our own, we're gonna book
But we're gonna, like,
tickets
stand next to each
separately.
other and pretend like we're we're like, face the other way.
It'll be like exactly. Okay,
Real,
Olivia,
real.
what's your,
So,
thought? Your pod thought?
my pod thoughts are BookTok. Is it the rise of sexual liberation for women, or is it the death of intellectualism?
Oh,
Yeah.
tea, tea.
Yeah, I have seen BookTok for a while. Are you familiar with BookTok? Do I need to, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
explain it? Okay, good.
I'm kind of on Book Talk, but, like,
Nice.
specifically Brandon
Yeah,
Sanderson.
that feels like a non-gendered BookTok. I
Yeah.
am specifically talking and I to be fair, listeners, I am really trying to read more, and that's always been, like, as I said, I have dyslexia, that's been a really big struggle for me, is reading. Right now, I'm reading the original Wuthering Heights so I can gather my thoughts for the movie because I have a lot of preliminary thoughts on it, and I wanna, like, actually, like, back it up with facts and knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, I have noticed BookTok because 'cause I'm kind of adjacent on TikTok spheres with, like, fantasy TikTok and, like, stuff like that, and BookTok has always kind of circled this, like, zeitgeist. It doesn't wanna call itself erotica, and I think that's because
Yeah.
erotica has negative connotations. It calls itself smut or, like, spicy usually,
Mhm.
and I think that's really weird and interesting, and I wanna talk about it.
I feel like the reason it's not called erotica is because I think erotica is specifically in the genre of, like, romance, like, that's the main plot point, that's all of these things, whereas, like, these other books, like, especially the fantasy genre, has underlying plot as a like, or maybe even overarching plot along with that.
So, my point here is I think that calling and I also understand that primarily TikTok and YouTube Shorts, you probably can't say certain words, right? You can't probably say erotica, but you
Mhm.
can say adjacent things, right? It's like instead of saying
Yeah.
you say corn or like stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, However, I feel like and I've noticed this also with like because I was a Tumblr girly, and I was a nerdy Tumblr girly. I noticed this in kind of 2014, and I've just seen it become mainstream through BookTok. This sort of like, I'm a super like sexually liberated woman, and I read smut for me, but I still call it smut because it's like cute and coy. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like a facade of cuteness around
Mhm.
erotica that irks me for some reason because I'm being presented to it by, I think, really grown women, and I'm also
Yeah.
being like, it's being used to sell me something. I
Yeah.
just find it really weird. The girls or the women talking about these books are also sort of, like, infantilizing themselves by using these, like, cutesy terms and being like,
Mhm.
"Peanut,
Yeah.
and I don't know what about it, it just feels gross, like, I just wanna be like, "Hey, like, we can just talk about sex openly," and I understand again,
Yeah.
I understand that TikTok is a platform and that, like, there are certain words you are allowed to use and not allowed to use for monetization, get thine bag, but I do feel like it's really infiltrated how media is created and how books are created now too, in a way that I
Mhm.
think is really concerning, but I also don't wanna, like shit on sexually liberated women and that being sexually liberated is really hard and often really complicated.
I think, like, the only way we can shit on sexually liberated women is, like, if we're telling these women, like, "Oh, you need to stop reading erotica," or, like,
Yeah.
"Stop reading these smut books." Like, I think criticizing the, characters themselves and the way that they're portrayed in a novel is completely fine and fair. If you're criticizing these people who are reading it and are saying like, "Oh, like, that's really odd that you're reading that," or it's like, the why would you read that?"
I do
And
think there
kind
are,
of
like,
demeaning them.
valid criticisms for erotica, and consuming erotica. I Princess Weeks has a really good, video on it, on romantasy specifically, and there are criticisms, but I agree with you. I think that people are doing what they wanna read, I guess, but I have a lot of
Mhm.
thoughts on it.
Yeah, no. I feel like I get where you're coming from. Um kind of this infantilization of women. I think the problem is that a lot of talking about sex, even within your own friend group, is very taboo. I think a lot of times people have shame when they're talking about like sex or like their desires or like their fantasies and things like that. So when they're reading, I think that's a way to escape that shame, or at least like, especially when you're reading alone. I think book talk is a little bit different because you're saying to people that you are reading these
You are
books, and like
marketing,
people
yeah.
know exactly, people know that these books are smut and like there are like sexual scenes in them. But you know, when you're reading these books by yourself and you're not like telling other people that you're reading them, or people don't know that they are smut books in the first place, it feels like an escape of that shame. That being said, I do think like with book talk specifically, you'll have people, you know, talking about these books and like using these innuendos. I think for one reason is because of like guidelines
Guidelines.
on TikTok and stuff like that. But I also think it um like, it's not doesn't push us forward in terms of society and in terms of sexual liberation to be using those innuendos. Like, why is it that we can't
Yeah.
why is it that we just can't, like, talk about sex? I'm curious. So, like, what about this, like, coyness do you think, like, bothers you?
Mm.
Um like, when you see somebody explaining, like, a book in, like, a specific way?
I think it's not, like, explaining a book. I think my actual thing about it is the fact kind of what we were talking about with, like, marketing this book, right? Book talkers, any TikTok ad and any TikTok group is trying to market something to you, right?
Mhm,
Whether it is Perfume Talk, who wants to sell you perfume, Shower Talk would want to sell you sugar scrubs, or
mhm,
Book Talk, which wants to talk about books and more importantly, sell books.
mm,
And I think with my issue with Book Talk is sort of this idea that spiciness of erotica, right? Spice in a book matters above all else,
mm,
and that books that do not have spice are boring and plain,
mm,
and that ever critiquing authors of book like book talk books such as ACOTAR is inherently seen as anti-feminist because you are, 1, critiquing typically female authors and critiquing female spaces in which sex is, like, talked about pretty frequently, and I think to me, that is gross.
yeah,
I think 1, I think the coyness irks me because it feels like infantilizing yourself when talking about smut and sex in a way that I think you should just be more upfront about, but that is
yeah,
also
just own it.
yeah, but I'm also willing to say that that is me projecting my own sexual trauma and my own sexual, like, repression onto these people. I had to do a lot of work of, like, being able to talk about sex comfortably from coming from a very religious and sexually repressive background.
Mhm.
And so maybe that could this is now my therapy session. And so, like, it could be said in, like, defense of these women, "Hey, like, you're just kind of projecting a negative emotion onto these people." But I do feel like Book Talk deserves some conversation around it, and I do think it
I
deserves
think
the good and
that's
the
the
bad.
thing with, like, with conversations right now and nowadays, I feel like nuance is dead.
Yeah,
When somebody says an opinion, the opinion doesn't have to be taken in a binary as in you're 100% right or you're 100% wrong. There can be nuances in the conversation of like, yes, I agree with you there, but on this point, I don't agree with you. Or like, here are like different cases in which this gets more complicated. When it comes to book talks, uh, I guess, way of marketing and skirting around the I guess, the conversations of sex. I think it's a conversation about guidelines and things like that, but also people's shame and their like how you said, how you have your own trauma about those things. I think it's also fair to criticize or critique rather, um, authors who have very like surface level characters and kind of don't follow the whole point of the story, and this is where the erotica versus smut comes in. The whole point of the story becomes like sex scenes rather than like even just the character's ability to connect with the other person or other people, right? Like it becomes a conversation of what is the plot aside from the sex scenes, because if your book isn't saying anything, if it didn't have the sex scenes, like what is it doing? Like I think a great example of how sex scenes can be used very positively is like heated rivalry. I think, like, watching for me, I'm a fan of the show, so watching, like, the beginning of, like, the 2 characters' romance start versus, like, their romance end, and specifically their sex at the beginning versus, like, at, like, the end of where we leave off in their
season 1.
relationship, it's very narrative, right? Like, I think it tells us about what is going on in their psyche, and I think in a book, like, if you have a plot that is worthless, I guess, without, like, the specific sex scenes and, like, the, idea of what the book is supposed to be about is only about sex, like, I don't see the point in reading something like that. I don't know.
Alternatively, though, then how do you feel? Because okay, I also watched Heated Rivalry, and it's fine. But I do feel like a big mass appeal of it is the sex scenes, right? And I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of conversation around Heated Rivalry, which itself is a BookTok book, it started out as a
Mhm.
BookTok book, is about the sex scenes. Like, how do you feel about that also? Like, in not just, like, narratively, just, like, in the sense that it is sex scenes. Kind of like in the way that I feel like Bridgerton is also sort of
Yeah.
talked about solely for sex scenes, and I think that's what I mean, is I feel like stuff like Heated Rivalry, like Bridgerton, and now with Wuthering Heights, Book Talk to me has sort of turned everything into, like, how spicy and smutty something can be in a way that I feel like is very detrimental to, like, storytelling. I think you can have
Mhm.
really good like, sex scenes with narrative storytelling. I really truly think that is something that you can do. I also don't think,
Mhm.
like, your character can have sex, and I think that's perfectly fine. But I do feel like Book Talk has kind of caused this rise in spice above all else that I think is a little bit bad.
Well, I would say my take on that is I think I agree with you that right now media in general is doing more explicit sex scenes for that shock value. And on one side of the coin, it at least normalizes the fact that sex happens. People are sexual creatures, for the most part. But then on the other side, it's like it almost devalues like the actual plot itself, only when the point is about the sex scenes. Like only when the rest of the narrative is clearly a second class citizen, I guess, in regards to the sex
Yeah.
scenes.
But, like, I feel like, and it's like, I tune into this because it's spicy, but not because it's good. And
Mhm.
I think, like, it's not written well, and I think that's my issue with Book Talk, is I feel like it really truly is women girl bossing together saying, "We are sexually liberated, thus we
Yeah.
can withstand trash." And erotica has always been
Mm.
kind of trashy, right? And I think there's nothing wrong with trash. I love trash, famously. Like, but I feel like at some point, like, when something like Wuthering Heights also becomes this, which Wuthering Heights has a lot of discussion around it, such as casting of Heathcliff being played by a white man. But I also think changing it into this sort of like spicy, sexy book is weird.
Or movie. Yeah.
Movie. Yeah, is weird.
Yeah.
And I
I
think it's a Book
think
Talk issue.
I think what you said about how we should accept the worse narratives because of like this idea of sexual liberation. I feel like that's a really interesting point because why can't we have both?
No, and I think we can, but I think people don't. I I I think my issue is pop feminism being used to sell
Mm.
me shit. That is what I've discovered. And I think Book Talk and sexual liberation through TikTok is just a new way for pop feminism to sell me shit under a patriarchal economic
Can you
system.
tell me what pop feminism is? I don't
I
know
would
what
be
it
so
is.
glad to. So pop feminism is probably more unanimously known as girl boss feminism.
Mm.
Think like Disney movies like Frozen or like the Aladdin remakes, where these princesses really are starting to say, like, I don't need to get married and I don't need a man, while also not really confronting any sort of patriarchal structure. It's a very comfortable,
Mhm.
usually still very patriarchal form of feminism. They often don't include discussions on intersectionality, on like transness, on race, class, whatever. And that is because it is such like a bland, like white toast version of feminism that is meant to be appealing to as many audiences as possible without upsetting anybody. It is the Spice Girls girl power feminism, but it cannot be upsetting feminism. It cannot
Mm.
be feminism that would make you seem like not a girl's girl or too radical, and that is pop feminism.
Mhm. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so you feel like the way that book talk is being marketed right now, specifically by these like heterosexual white women, is
Yes.
very like
Yeah.
fem feminist pop or
Pop
pop
feminist. I think it's
feminism?
very pop feminist.
Mhm.
I do, and I think pop feminism still can do good. I personally also don't think pop feminism is inherently bad. I think it's a great entryway for a lot of young
Mhm.
women into feminism. Right? I think a lot of very young women just go, yeah, yeah, girl power, that's awesome. Woo! And like then they can learn about other shit as they go forward.
Right.
But I do think it's a huge, huge boost for capitalism and
Yeah.
consumerism, as
Yeah.
everything is. But I think with pop feminism can kind of then it deflects easier, right?
You're right.
You're critiquing it, you're critiquing feminism or you're critiquing women's sexual liberation. If you don't like heated rivalry, for
Yeah.
example, you could be called a homophobe whether you are or not.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting when we have conversations about critiquing media in general that is very spicy and like kind of takes the spice level to a point where it doesn't necessarily need to, and like we judge, all of these things. I think a good example that comes to my mind is I would see a lot of criticisms on Brandon Sanderson's like books not
Really?
being spicy enough.
Oh.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I was gonna be
Not
like,
being spicy
"Wow."
enough, being so bland and like not like having all of these things. And I think the issue is, like, that's not the point
Yeah.
of those books, right? Like, I think I get what you're saying when it's almost like a disservice when, like, people think that, like, if your piece of media doesn't have any spices in it or any, like, smut in it, then it's not worth it. Um, and I think that that criticism is very unfair because then that's not the point of
No.
all media. Like,
Not
it's
all
not
books need
like,
to
it
be
doesn't.
spicy, and that's okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also wanna say though, like and I'm not in Brendan Sanderson's, like I'm not interacting with his fan base a lot. I do wonder how much of that criticism does come from the fact that he is a Mormon man, and
Mhm.
that even myself, like, when I first found out he was Mormon, I was kind of like, "Okay." I know he's very, like, progressive, which I think is wonderful
Mhm.
for a man of faith to also be progressive,
Yeah,
but I do
that's fair.
wonder if a lot of that sort of, like, critique of him not having spicy books is also sort of assuming that he will never talk about sex because he is religious. And which I also think that the flip side of that could be like, then if he does talk about sex, people will think he's weird for talking about
Mm,
sex because he's religious. I sort of feel like he's on a weird I think he's on a weird double-sided coin sort of situation where
yeah,
his religion he's going to be viewed as a Mormon man no matter what he does, and whether that is good or bad is going to be inherent on how he behaves in his books.
yeah.
So,
That's the thing, like, his most recent book had, like, the sliverest of a spicy scene, but it was, like, a big talking point because they're like, "Oh my god, like, he actually
go
included
hard.
something, that's crazy, like, oh my goodness," like, but yeah, I think for him specifically, it'll be very shocking if he does anything more than what he's doing, not only because he is a Mormon man, or like a religious person who sees that like sex isn't something to be talked about aside from like in your marriage
Context,
or
yeah.
whatever, but I think it'll be weird because that's just not like what his books are about.
Yeah.
Like it'll be odd to it'll be almost like he's trying to commercialize it. It's, like, inauthentic if he does do that, which kind of sucks because right now he recently got, like, a deal with Apple TV to, like, produce some of his, books, which I'm so excited about,
Good
but I'm kind of
job.
worried that they're gonna be over-sexualized because that's just, like, how you sell things nowadays,
Yeah.
like you were saying. The more spicy it is, the better, essentially,
Especially
and I
with
hope
the
that's
rise of
not the
spicy
case.
BookTok.
Exactly, and I don't think we're trying to say to our listeners that spicy books are bad.
No.
I
No,
think
no,
we
no.
should be demanding spicy books with narrative,
Yeah.
like, with good
You
writing,
you can
good
enjoy your
characters.
trash, also read a
Yeah.
classic book once in your life, it's okay. Read some classic literature too, you'll be fine. Yeah, I think that's really good. Alright, well, I guess on a lighter topic, Ariane, what is your sermon studies? For those
Uh,
that don't know really quickly, sermon studies are kind of like things that we do that we wanna share with our audience, like stuff that we've experienced this week, like crafts, movies, books, or just general cool vibes. So what you got?
so, speaking of Bridgerton, I've been watching Bridgerton this past this past
So
week, and
topical!
really good. Okay, actually, no, it's not really good, but I love the vibes. I
Good,
love
it's
the
sweet, it's
flowers.
very sweet.
I like my wedding was based off of
I
Bridgerton
had the
in the
best
sense
wedding,
that
it
I
was
love
really
the
cute.
flowers and the like the like all the flowers, the color scheme. I kind of took Bridgerton as my inspiration for that. So, I've been watching Bridgerton. So yeah, I like it. Like it's
It's
I'm
a
gonna
feel-good
finish
show,
it.
it's
Like I
nice,
like
yeah.
the vibe, but I wouldn't say it's like a good season so far.
Interesting. That's really unfortunate.
Mhm.
Netflix seems to be, like, having a
Dropping the
yeah,
ball.
seems to be having a bummer time with a lot of their shows right
Mhm.
now. I know I've
Yeah.
never seen Stranger Things. I'm really sorry, everyone
Oh, yeah.
involved, but I
It
heard
was
that was
okay.
really Micah told me that was really bad. Um, that is the
Yeah.
only other Netflix show I know of. Think of off the top of my head. That's great. That's great. I love that for you, girl.
Yeah. What's your sermon study?
Mine is going to be Company of Wolves. It is a movie in the 80s. Actually, I'm changing this. I'm changing this really on the spot.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
changing it on
okay.
the spot. I'm actually gonna say Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Oh,
I watched it with
okay.
Marianne when I was in Canada, and I really like it. I have not liked or I guess I just really haven't been interested in any other Game of Thrones, like, project. I never watched the original show. I've seen, like, clips of it. Like, I have a vague understanding of what happens. But I've just never really cared to watch it, and then I never really watched House of the Dragon, but I watched Night of the Seven Kingdoms with Marianne, and it's really good, and I'm gonna watch the latest episode that comes out tomorrow.
Yeah. No,
So,
it's a good show. I think it's very different than, Game of Thrones because it's much more lighthearted,
yeah.
at least, as of
It feels more
episode
sincere.
4 or 5.
It feels more
Yeah,
sincere.
it's so much easier. I really like the direction that they're
I do
taking,
too.
this show.
The
Yeah.
kid actor in it, Egg, best child
He's
actor I've
so
ever
cute.
seen.
He's
Best
so
child actor I've ever
cute.
seen. I
He's
love
so
him.
bitty. Yeah.
I definitely think I've developed a crush on the main knight. I love him dearly. Whole heart.
He's so
I know
derpy.
my internal monologue sounds like him now, which is concerning.
It's
I
really
love
funny.
him so. He is my dumb himbo husband.
He is a himbo.
He's
He's
a
the definition of a
himbo.
himbo. Uh,
And I really like it.
Alrighty.
Alright. I think that's it for
Well,
us guys this week.
yeah, that's it for
We
today.
love
Thank you for
you.
listening.
Thank you for listening. Bye, diva.